All right, so the video that some people have been waiting for, I guess because my last couple of videos did so well, I had some people comment and I had like 4 or 5 people DM me on Instagram if I was selling my template, if I was gonna make a video on it, where they could find a video about my template in general. So I just thought that I would make a video. I make one every year at the top of every year, so you can go back and check out those videos. But yeah, to be honest, there's really not that much of a difference, just besides obviously plugins and some layout things or whatever. But if I wanted to take people's money, I definitely would. But I'm not that type of person. And to be honest, a template's a template. There's really no secrets behind it. All this, everybody has the same tools, all the same plugins. It's just how you use it and what's being inputted into your template, meaning like the type of song and music and all that stuff. So yeah, let's just jump right into it. If you're new here, like, share, subscribe, check out my other videos. I would highly appreciate it. Otherwise, yeah, enjoy this video. We're just gonna go through everything. So kind of similar. If you're used to a recording console, you can see a lot of the same plugins, a lot of the same tracks and stuff like that. And I think the easiest thing first is just to go by sections, and then we'll go between each bus and what plugins I'm using and why. But yeah, hopefully this will be probably gonna be a long video. We'll see. So the first thing you can see is that I'm utilizing folder tracks, right? All the way through, we have folder tracks. I have this record folder, which for me, what's important to the recording process is TalkBack, because my interface, I'm using an Avid interface, has a built-in TalkBack system. So I can go ahead and use that. I can set up an external mic, whatever I want to do with that. Then the next thing is this DSP record track, which, because I'm using an Avid Carbon, I'm able to use Avid DSP chips essentially. So basically the same thing as Universal Audio. The only difference between this and Universal Audio is obviously with Universal Audio you can record with some of their plugins on the way in, and it's actually affecting the way that it would sound like if you're recording through the real gear. So with this, the difference with this is that I can only monitor through plugins technically, but because I'm setting this up like a Universal Audio console application, if you're familiar with that, you just have this front end console, virtual console, before it hits your DAW, which allows you to have the low latency monitoring, allows you to record with the plugins on the way in, stuff like that, and you get all that quote unquote analog sound or whatever. So my version of that works exactly the same way, except everything is being handled within Pro Tools, and I'm not clipping within Pro Tools. It's just because we're monitoring through this track, because that's how I have my template set up. So if you're seeing the yellow, I'm actually tracking through OBS and not through this. But anyways, so you can see that we have our DSP. So you can imagine this as basically the console app. Like I said, this is unique to Pro Tools and the Avid Carbon. You can still do this natively. Obviously, you're just gonna have to deal with some latency depending on what plugins you're using. So because this is like our console app, we are essentially monitoring through these plugins that I have set up. And then this DSP track is coming out of its own bus into the actual record track. So if you're familiar with a record track, essentially it's just this track where all the audio feeds through, and that's where you start dropping down your recorded audio. But the reason I have this on the front end is because that allows me to send my vocal chain, in this case, through this plugin and this LA2A. I mean, this EQ, this Avid EQ, and this LA2A. So same thing, when I play it back, it's going to have these printed plugins on there. Obviously it's not going to be exactly the same as UA, with how they have their unison technology set up. So it's supposed to essentially, that input signal is going to be treated like if it was actually hitting the gear in a more realistic way, if that makes sense. But for me, because I don't have any outboard gear currently recording, I do like to record with EQ, a little bit of EQ and a little bit of compression on the way in. So this allows me to do that. So hopefully that's clear. Hopefully that makes sense. I'll go through it again. So basically, This is my DSP track that I'm calling it. This is essentially like a UAD console. You can do all your processing on here just like you would do in the UAD console app. That is being fed into this record track, which is where the actual recording is going to be done. So it'll show up here. You'll see a record clip. So essentially, you can think of it as we're coming out of our virtual console right here, and we're feeding into our DAW, in this case, Pro Tools. So it's the same concept. This just allows me to record through pretty much any plugin that I want for the most part. Because I'm using an Avid Carbon, they do have their own HDX plugins. That's what they call them in the Avid world. There's plugin companies like Plugin Alliance, obviously Avid, you can see, and Oxford plugin. There's a bunch of companies. Mic DSP, they all make their own HDX versions of plugins, and yeah, there's a bunch of companies that do it, but basically it just allows you to record or monitor through their plugins in real time with near to zero latency. So we're taking that feature and we're just treating it like a UAD system and recording through our plugins in real time. So yeah, that's that long tangent on that. And like I said, we'll talk about all the routing and stuff, but I kind of want to just explain this because I've explained this in a separate video before. So if you haven't seen that, you can check that out as well. But you can see on our record track, so on this track, we would technically only be monitoring these two plugins at this point. So this would be the SSL 9000J by Plugin Alliance and the de-esser. And I'm using this specific one because, like I just said, Sonics makes an HDX version, aka a DSP version, so I can monitor through a de-esser on the way in. And then we have our click track. So basically, that's why I'm calling it the record folder, just because it has all my recording tools within the folder. And like I said, because it's in a folder, I can close it and tuck it away if I need to do that. And the next thing we have is our drum bus. So all our drums would be in here. Another thing that I would talk about or mention real quick is this is my recording and mixing template in one, because I don't tend to use a lot of plugins, and because I'm used to working on an HDX system, DSP system basically, I'm like not too worried about having separate templates. I know a lot of people have separate templates. I just don't want to do that. I just want to work fast, and I feel like if I'm going to record and implement my go-to stuff anyway, I might as well just track through it. But saying that, I'm not recording actual drums through these folders or anything like that. I'm not doing any recording through any of these folders as listed, so I would never record my synths through here, my piano through here. This is all just mixing folders essentially, but in this case, this is the only one that I would have actual recording through, because you can see right here on my record track, I just have it, linked to my lead bus track, and that is being fed here, and this is where my actual recording is done. So besides my actual instruments, I would never do that, especially if it's like a band or something, because that would just it would just be too crazy to be like messing around within these folders and stuff. So anything that's being recorded besides vocals would be done outside of my template. So like somewhere down here essentially, basically. So yeah, I'm used to working that way. I know it could probably seem maybe a little complicated, or maybe not the way that you would want to work, but it works for me. Like I said, the biggest thing is that I'm never doing any tracking through any of these. Just because these are here does not mean I'm tracking through them. These are just mixing folders, is the way that I like to think about them, with the exception of my record folder, because these are just like click track, record track, my low latency DSP track, and my talkback stuff. So yeah, I just thought I would mention that before we go any further, so you're not, unless you want to, but I wouldn't recommend recording through any folders, because just gets too crazy. I mean, they are auxiliaries at the end of the day, but I just think having a nice clean session and recording, outside of your template, because I'm just looking at this whole thing as like a template basically. And yeah, so yeah, that's that. That's a little tangent on that, but just wanted to make that clear, so nobody's like trying to record through these folders and stuff as we get through this video. But yeah, so we have a drum bus, we have a percussion bus, so anything percussive obviously, synth bus, pianos or keys bus. I got to go through and rename a few things. I'll just actually just do it now. So I'm gonna call this piano key. This is like something you're always fine tuning. So do that, and then I got to remember to name this. You can see I'm, just super organized as much as possible. I'm not married to this coloring on the input and output. At first I thought it was cool, but I don't know. I think it kind of it gets a little distracting. I don't know if that makes sense. And this is something I did when they first brought out this feature, and I might revert back to just, gray ins and outs or whatever, because it does kind of throw me off. I think there's been a few times where I've accidentally sent stuff based on the color. And like, for instance, you can see the string bus and my doubles bus are almost the same shade. So I think, it can get confusing in that sense or whatever. So yeah, otherwise though, yeah, you'll notice that I'm super organized. I try to be as organized as possible, just the way that I learn things, being in a recording studio, and especially doing getting my feet wet on the post-production side. Those guys are like super, super organized because they're dealing with video, different takes. I mean, we are too, but in a different way. And yeah, so those guys are super organized. So kind of stole some organization stuff from them. And yeah, anyways, you can see guitar, strings, brass, just pretty much trying to get every single instrument covered. Because for me, I'm also not a person that is going to try to, like sell you on a country template, a rap template, whatever the case is. Like, you know what I mean? This is all going to be the same. I'm trying to just make a universal template at the end of the day, because me personally, because I'm working on so many different genres pretty often, I just have my template and have refined it over the years to just kind of be a solid recording and mixing template, and not, hey, this is only for, you know, rap or whatever the case is. Because you can see, we'll get through it. I got auto tune on everything and on stuff. But anyways, so then we can come down here, which this was kind of like a hit in my last video. I don't know why, like, people were really intrigued by the throws. So I thought more people knew about it than I did. I guess, I don't know, but it seems like a lot of people were like super interested in this part. So anyways, throw bus. If you haven't seen that, you can go check that out. I won't go too much into detail about it because I did basically make like a super detailed video on this folder, and yeah, you can go check that out. But yeah, if you are returning from those videos, you can see we just have our throws folder. Then after that, we have a V lead bus, so verses. Basically, I personally like to separate my chorus, verses, you can see doubles, harmonies, all that. I like to separate them. At the end of the day, you also notice that I just want full control of everything, because I mentioned this in my last video. I do need to make stems most of the time, especially when artists need live stems and stuff like that. So it's just easier for me to get as close as possible to the final mix into stems, essentially, because we all know making stems can be a little bit difficult the more routing and stuff you have, because it's really hard to print all of your, plugins and stuff like that, because just the way that signal flow works and stuff like that. So and then obviously for me, I'm always doing a lot of automation, so just trying my best to make sure that, yeah, I get all that stuff printed on there. And yeah, pretty similar to for the verses and the chorus. You can see we have our de-esser, which I'm a huge fan of the Sonic stuff. Go check them out if you haven't even heard of them. I'm sure everybody has, but go check them out if you haven't. I think they're partnered with Focusrite and Atom Audio now and stuff, so they're kind of just one big company, but they make native and DSP stuff. Next one is SSL. I'm personally using the Universal Audio one for my lead vocals. I think I kind of switch it up throughout the template. Yeah, just kind of been using that, I guess. Then I have my Kirchhoff EQ, which another plugin that people have but weren't too familiar with it. Got a lot of good feedback on this plugin and stuff. So Kirchhoff EQ, basically the Pro Q, just not the Pro Q, essentially. And then I have another de-esser just for a different frequency range. And like I said, these are the only tracks technically that I would be monitoring through as I'm tracking. It just depends. It depends on the vibe, depends on the pace. If I'm doing like a quick pace session, like, rap or something, I'm definitely just gonna avoid that and just work outside of my template. And then as the session progresses, I'll start slowly routing stuff or whatever when there's some downtime. But yeah, so that's that. And then pretty much the same thing. I just times it by 6 just in case, yeah, we end up doing like more tracks and stuff like that. Same thing with the hook bus. You can see same plugins, whatever. And then basically all these tracks, as you can see, are in a auxiliary folder, and these are all being outputted into essentially this bus, and you can see this bus and stuff like that. So on the actual bus where all of these vocals are going to eventually feed, I kind of have my overall shine, I guess, if that makes sense. This is kind of something new that I've been using within the last couple months. I really like the tube tech. I don't like the idea of not having it in my template or not using it, because I do think that there is a lot of character and stuff within this plugin itself. I think they did a really good job of replicating this into a plugin. I think for me personally, in my experience, in my own ears, I use the TubeTech a pretty good amount in real life. So this feels pretty familiar and it sounds familiar. The only thing I hate how they added this bar. I wish they would have put a window where you can hide this, because I thought it looked like the real thing before this. But anyways, yeah, so they all feed into this. You can see I kind of have like a vocal start preset and stuff. That's another thing too. I'm never trying to have any stuff set, any presets or anything like that, unless it's my own personal stuff that I know is going to be like more of like a safety preset, instead of like, 16K boosted all the time. That's my sound kind of thing. Like I'm just like, it's mostly just compression that I have set up kind of, and it's not a lot because I don't want to be in a situation where I hit play back and then the artist is like, well, why does my vocal sound smashed, or why does it sound like this or whatever. So same thing with EQ. I try not to do any presets. I should have reset that because I think I did do that by accident. Yeah, so you can see I reset my EQ and stuff because there was a one point where I accidentally loaded a preset from a session that I really liked, and I kept the EQ on, and I went to go tracking and stuff, and I was like, why does this sound so bright or whatever? It doesn't sound like how it did in the room. And then, yeah, come to find out it's because I accidentally saved my template with an already preset setup as far as EQ goes. But for me, the only thing I really have set up for a preset would be compression. So yeah, just thought I'd throw that out there just in case that helps anybody with tracking through templates and stuff. Because at the end of the day, like, it can be a complicated thing, but don't make it more complicated, because there is a lot of routing and stuff that can be done. And at the end of the day, you're trying to manage latency and all that. And obviously the artist's mix and your mix, the headphone mix, whatever the case is. So the last thing you want to do is have it sounding different when you hit play, if that makes sense, because you can save a huge headache by doing that. But anyways, after that, I have a little radiator, just for some mid-range tone. I just like the way this sounds, a little bit of drive that it adds in grit. And I've talked about this so many times, but I have presets that I do make. I have a 25%, a 5%, 50%. And yeah, that just changes the amount of, saturation, distortion that's being added. Then after that, I have a limiter, which is just catching all the peaks that's kind of coming through this last bit of compression that the compressor is not fully, taking care of, essentially. And then after that, I have the Spectre by Waves Factory, which is just more of this final shine that's added to the vocal. Now, I did say that I don't try to use presets, and that's another thing, is that I'm also not turning any of this stuff on automatically. As far as buses and vocals go, this is all stuff that I'm like slowly starting to creep in as I'm mixing. obviously within the actual individual track. So these plugins, I would be doing more of the tone shaping and heavy lifting and cutting, boosting, whatever the case is, for sure on these. But when it comes to the overall bus, these plugins are staying off maybe 75% through, if that makes sense. I'm not, I have to commit to a vocal sound if we're talking about vocals right now, before I even think about turning this on, because the last thing I want to do is fight this because I didn't get it correct here, if that makes sense. So yeah, just another thing to keep in mind is make sure you got everything set up ahead of time before you start doing overall shaping. Because yeah, you just want to take care of it here as much as possible. That's why I don't really like the idea of, what was the thing that was like popular a couple years ago, like top down mixing, where you start from your, I did do like an iteration of it, but yeah, it's just like the last thing you want to do is have your overall, mix being shaped by three plugins, and then like, I don't know, for some reason you end up not wanting those plugins, or the mastering engineer that tells you to change something. I don't know, specifically talking about the mix bus right now. I don't know, I just don't like the idea of it. Like, I think it's easier to do it here. And another thing too is that some takes might sound different than other takes. You might record a completely different day, and you have to fine tune each of these, even though they're the same chain. You might have to fine tune each take, so they sound a little bit more cohesive, or if not close as possible. Which is another reason that I have so many of these tracks set up, and obviously the same exact plugins, is because I just want full control in making sure that I'm making every single take, if I do end up having to work in that way. Yeah, just making sure that I have full control of making sure that they sound good. So yeah. And then doubles here, you can see I'm using a completely different channel strip, just trying to switch it up a little bit, make it sound different. Using the 9000J for this, you can see auto tune. That's another thing too. I have auto tune inactive, but it is the first instance of plugins on each track, just in case I need to, yeah, if I'm doing rap and I need to record with auto tune on the way in, yeah, obviously, because that's the vibe, then I have it ready to go. If it's just something where I just need like a quick light tune, then I have it to go. Otherwise, I can just print it down or use Melodyne down here and do that. So yeah, it's just about having all the tools in your back pocket. So yeah, same thing here, doubles, using auto tune, channel strip, and then the overall bus up here. I'm using a Kirchhoff EQ, which we just talked about. And I personally like the SSL bus compressor. I mean, it is a bus compressor. Obviously, not saying that you need to exactly use it for that, but I do genuinely like the way this can handle a group of vocals. I think it just clamps them down, and yeah, just makes them sit in the mix a little bit better. So I'm personally using the bus compressor 2 by SSL. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And then the same thing with here, I think I'm using the J as well. Yeah. So with the BGVs, same exact situation, just doing that Kirchhoff EQ bus compressor, same as the doubles. And then let's close this up so we can get a better visual. You can see that the output of all of these sections get bussed to their own, I like to call them buckets, essentially. So all drums, all bass, all percussion, all synths, pianos, guitar, blah, 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 all that stuff being here. This is like, I like to think of it as my mix bus, but for each individual things. They're all doing something slightly different. If I need to do some last minute automation over a section, I'm doing it here, just because obviously with the way signal flow works, you never want to, or you want to try to avoid doing stuff, pre or post, because that can affect your plugin. So if you want something to hit a plugin harder, then you do it pre. If you want something to not do that, then maybe you got to find a way to do it post, whatever the case is. You can also set up VCAs Another thing that I like to do is volume trim. I think that's huge, especially that they added it to the studio version because it used to only be an ultimate essentially. So yeah, anyways, that's a whole nother thing, but that's the reason that I have it set up like this as well. And then it also allows me to make super quick stems. If someone's like, yo, I just need something to practice to, can you just make me some stems and I'll take out what I need? Then I can come here, highlight all of them, right click, hit bounce, and then they have the overall group of, that version of the track. Obviously, because like we just talked about, this is pre, it's not going to have any of the mix bus or master bus stuff. So yeah, that's that. Um, so the first thing, because all the drums are being fed to this, we'll call it drum mix bus essentially. I'm using this British Class A console, so it's just a Neve console by Softtube. I kind of just chose it one day and I wanted to use it and it stayed. And I just like the compressor on it, to be honest. And I just like 3-band EQ. I think if you need some final little bit of compression or just a tad bit more EQ, whether it's getting a hi-hat to come back in the mix without physically having to change it with the fader or adding a little bit more crack on the snare, whatever the case is, I just feel like this is always helpful if I want to do something cool and automate the drive to get distorted for a section or whatever the case is. I'm also doing that as well. And yeah, so, and otherwise, like I said, I just like the way it sounds, and that's pretty much it. It's a Neve. Can't go wrong with it. Same thing with a bass. I'm using the 33609, but it is Arturio's version because I don't own the UAD version because they don't have it native yet, right? Unless somebody knows it's a native now, I don't know. But same thing, just always stuck with it. It's a Neve 33609. I also just like the way that it sounds on bass. If I need some last minute compression, tuck the bass a little bit more because I like where my mix bus is sitting or I like the level of the bass, then yeah, this helps me do that kind of 33609 thing, I guess, if that makes sense. So for me, these last minute things are just last minute bells and whistles that I can do to do that. Then my all percussion, I'm using a black box. Like I said, same thing. If I just want a little bit more life, especially if it's like something like, people are grabbing stuff from Splice, whatever the case is. Sometimes those aren't the best quality. So this is a good way of like bringing those, basically MP3, even though they say wave, I can tell some of them are just uploaded, but you download them as waves or whatever, but they're probably low quality MP3s. So it's just kind of a cool way to bring stuff back to life. Then my synths, these are kind of a little bit different. They're doing more heavy lifting stuff, changing the sonic scape, I guess we can say. I'm using the SPL Iron. I never tried it on a mix bus. I know technically it's a mastering compressor, but I've talked about this before. I like the stereo width knob on Plugin Alliance's stuff. I actually just made a video on this. So the one before this video when it drops, go check that out. Talk about the Mog EQ and bass. Except we're doing the opposite. We're not making the bass mono. We're making stuff stereo. So down here, I just like the way this stereo width sounds. I don't know what this is. I know it's like a tube compressor, essentially, right? I'm not too familiar with it, but I also know there's something to do with the railing or the rail or whatever. It's a big deal. Whatever. Point is, I'm using the stereo width. I don't do any compression on it at all. I just literally like running my synths, and you can see the guitar here. I do the same thing. The only difference is that the stereo width is slightly different on each one, just because I don't want them to be, sonically in the same space as far as the stereo field goes. And then, yeah, so just thought I'd knock the synths and the guitar because the same plugin. Oh, and the strings and the brass. Yeah, because I did end up switching on this template. I was using other stuff, but I was like, the SPL Iron just works, does what I need to do. Yeah, so just knocked out all those. And then the only different one is this piano bus, and we'll call it piano keys, because remember earlier we changed it in there, so I'll rename it here as well. I'll figure out a different abbreviation. That's another thing too, is I hate when I can't read exactly what they are. Obviously, it's my template, so I know what this is, but sometimes you got to deal with it, even like the percussion stuff. Um, but anyways, microshift. I like the way it sounds on pianos. I think I made this preset. I could be wrong. I'm pretty sure I made this preset. Yes, I did. Okay. So yeah, it's just I called it piano with. I honestly just did it on a piano one day and I was like, damn, this is making a huge difference. And I just saved it and threw it into my template immediately. So here, so you can copy these settings if you're into it. Yeah, try these settings out on your piano next time. If you're working this way or just in general, it just adds a little bit more width, doesn't get any weird phasiness or anything like that. But obviously, it's going to depend on the piano too, if it's recorded well or produced well, whatever the case is. But anyways, I like the microshift on piano stuff, so that's what I use. And then let's see. So yeah, pretty much you can basically just say, like I said, I'm calling them mini mix buses for each section of the song or instrumental, whatever the case is. But also, in a way, I'm not, and this is not the end goal, but you can also think of it as like a final summing. Like, let's make these all have their own little character before we hit our mix bus. So that's another thing too. It's just like kind of like a summing situation, even though technically we're using different modules, but it's just to make things a little bit different. And like I said, just that final touch, grease, whatever we're adding to something, that cherry on top. And then all vocals, talked about this my recent video too, like 2 videos ago. So same thing. I'm using this ensemble and Air Flanger. They're Avid plugins. Something I stole from Alex Toomey years ago in like 2016 probably. And I don't know if he's actually using these anymore. I'd be curious if he is, but it just stuck with me, and I just remember it was a cool trick that I got from him, and yeah, it just kind of stuck around. So I don't know. I feel weird not having them. It's probably placebo, but I mean, they are doing something, but it's also probably a little bit of placebo too, but I don't care. As long as it gets me to the mix, that's all I care about. But after those two, we have our, I like to think, final stage of vocal compression. So because this is all vocals, BGVs, doubles, hook, lead, whatever, ad libs, even the vocal throws, they're all, or actually vocal throws is going to its own thing. I take that back. But all vocal stuff will eventually be summed into this. I'm personally using the Shadow Hills as the actual, I know they're both mastering versions, but I think this one is technically in the name called the Shadow Hills mastering compressor, because the other one's just the Shadow Hills compressor or something like that. I can't remember. There's a difference between the name, but I just like this one better. I think it does. I think the green one, the original one, as far as the plugin goes, is just too subtle for me. I'm just like, I absolutely cannot hear anything. Like, it just sounds like a compressor. It doesn't sound unique, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But this one, I don't know exactly I know there is a difference, but I don't know exactly what that would be. But this one has more of a tone, in my opinion. I can actually, I think I can actually hear. I'll have to go back and uh, do a reference between both of them. But from what I remember and from what somebody told me, like, hey, you should try out this one. It just came out when this version came out years ago. Um, and yeah, I just like the way it sounds and compresses. That's the big thing. I just like the way it compresses too. If you're not too familiar with the Shadow Hills, you basically have two compressors into one. You can see left and right channel, they're both the same thing, but up here is where there's a difference. You have an optical compressor in all your settings, and then you have a discrete. So something like, like an SSL or like an LA2A or something like that. I guess is like that style of compression. I'm personally using discrete compressor. I just want to have control over my attack and release. The optical sounds fine, but yeah, I just want to have that control. Like I said, at the end of the day, my template is all about control, and adjusting your attack and release can make a huge difference on something. And then I just stuck with the steel. Another thing, I'm not really hearing a difference between the nickel, iron, and steel. Some people can. I personally can't yet, so they probably have better ears than me. But yeah, I just stuck with the steel. Um, and then I usually do add a little bit of stereo width. It's at default right now, which is 100%. But I do recall, I should just save it. I usually do like 105. Let's just do that. 105. Yeah, another thing, just utilizing Brainworks' stereo width because I don't know what they're doing and how different it is compared to everybody else, but it just sounds really good. And let me bypass this. And then the last thing is, like I said earlier, the final EQ on our vocals. This is a good way to shape everything, especially if you go to your chorus and your BGVs are in, your lead vocals are in, your doubles are in. It's just this final way of being able to be like, all right, if they're not gelling together 100%, hopefully this EQ can do it and we'll scoop out the same frequency or we'll add the same frequency range to the vocals as a group, as a whole, essentially. So, yeah, just the last minute EQ. And I just like the Kirchhoff EQ because you have dynamic built in, you have standard static EQ, you have all these different EQ curves and stuff that it's modeled after and stuff. So you can go crazy with it. All sound effects. This technically should have this. I don't know why I didn't. I always add it in the mix as I'm mixing or whatever. So I just need to add it to my template now. So all sound effects get bust here. Black box, all effects, black box, which would mean these, my vocal effects, like pitching, stuff like that, and reverbs and delays are all being bussed here. So like I said, you can see that it's super clear that I am just trying to have full control over everything and making sure that at the end of the day when I make stems or whatever the case is, or that I just have control over everything and I can make different versions of stuff at different points of the signal path. So if I want a majority of the plugins that I'm using, then maybe I would bounce from here, but I just wouldn't have as much individual control. But then maybe I can do it with these buses and have a little bit more control, but it would have less processing. So hopefully this is making sense now, is that like I just also have control over the style or way that I'm making stems. And then my entire session now is being fed into this master fader, not master bus, master fader. Because I think there's a little bit of, which also took me a while to wrap my head around, but just because in Pro Tools, this is called a master fader. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily your mix bus. That's just the type of track that it is. But there are people that actually work with, master faders. Yeah. So I'm just trying to work like a console too. Not saying I necessarily grew up on a console, but went to school and stuff and did the whole thing. We had a Neve VR, we had Trident, we had a little SSL and stuff. So I know my way around a console. And like I said, because I was taught that way, I just got used to working that way and setting up my Pro Tool sessions that way because that's the way we were taught. So like I said, not necessarily saying you need to work that way. It has nothing to do with the template or anything like that. But that is, if anybody's wondering why I have it set up, music, all this, then my master fader, whatever, and then my effects all the way on the right side. So, if you look at a console, you'll see you have all your audio tracks or your, mixing channels. And then at some point you'll hit your console or your monitor section, which is usually in the middle of the console. And then, like I said, how I learned is all the effects were always on the right side of the console. So on the right side of the monitor section, if you can imagine yourself sitting in front of a console. So like I said, not saying that's necessarily right, or this way is right or wrong. That's just the way I was taught, and that's the way my brain works. And I just see Pro Tools as like a console because after all, that is what they made the program after, because they were out for a really long time. So whole sessions being fed into that, and then my master feeds into my actual mix bus. Now we're talking about actual mix bus, which is just an auxiliary track that I have renamed mix bus. I'm sending it to multiple outputs. I just do that just because sometimes I want to monitor for OBS. Sometimes I want to send it out to other things if I'm, or other places if I'm working at a different studio, whatever the case is. So that's why there's that little plus if anybody's wondering. It just means I'm sending it out to multiple outputs. So you can see I'm using the Pro Tools bridge that's built in. So it's just virtual IO essentially. But that's just for OBS if I were to use audio in there. Mixbus, talked about this in my last couple of videos too, go a little bit more in depth, but you know, we're talking about it here. So Mixbus, the first thing is I need to do some rearranging. I need to take these off actually. So I'm not going to talk about things. I'm going to take them off right now because I no longer want to work that way. So let's do that. So the first thing is our Cream 2, which is a Acoustica plugin. It's just a console emulation. I actually genuinely think this sounds good. I've said this before so many times. I don't know if the C actually means console, but this one sounds the best in my opinion compared to the line mic tube 1 or tube 2. Like I said, I don't know if this actually means console, but I like the C, so that's what I have. And we are going to put this here now. We're doing this in real time, folks, because I changed the way my plugin, you know, work or signal flow was in the last couple sessions, and I like the way this was hitting this or whatever. So now we have a whole session feeding it. It was already doing that, but I like the idea of being able to hit this pre a little bit harder or less with using the master fader. So we have that there. And then we hit, we're going to take this off, PSP Vintage Warmer. We're taking that off. And then technically on this master, going back to this master fader, not my mix bus, we have another Kirchhoff EQ, so I can do overall EQ. Usually that's a last minute thing. So if I need to do some last minute shaping, this is here if I need it. It's not always on. And you can see I have an SSL meter here. I like to monitor my mix here before, so pre plugins, because I don't want to see, you know, my meters pinned all the way because all these things are going to start adding gain and whatever. I want to know how hot my mix is before I start hitting plugins, just so that I know that I'm feeding them or feeding my mix bus enough signal. And this allows me to do that. So when I know that I'm at the sweet spot here, if mix calls for it, then I know I'm in a good spot. So it's basically just a last minute pre-mix bus visual monitor, and I can see how everything is working or not working together. So that's why that's there. But yeah, back to the mix bus now. Mix bus compressor that I'm using, Verymu, talked about this so many times as well. I'm just using a Tom Elmhurst preset that's not built into the plugin. I stole it from his video that he did with Manly. It doesn't sound exactly like it, but it gets the job done. I never mess with any of the settings. The only time I'm messing with anything is the input, and that's it, which usually about right there. I'm going to save that, command save. That's usually where I have it because there is a little bit of volume adjustment that I need to do every time, and I always forget to save my template with it, and it's always right in the middle. So anyways, yeah, that's that, using the Verymu. And then after that, I have my Mog EQ, which, like I said, last video before this one, talk about this thing. So I'm using the Mog K-Comp. Definitely using the K-Comp itself. It's just a focused mid-range compressor. And yeah, just makes you and lets you tame your mid-range a little bit without having to use an EQ. I'm using the soft limit, so just have a little bit of soft limiting going on. I like the way it sounds. Mog, if you see this, I don't know if it is special enough, but it would be cool if you made a soft limit plugin, standalone plugin, because I think that would be cool. Or even hardware, unless you already have it and I don't know about it. Yeah, boost on the low and top end, blah, 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 just like a Pultec, essentially. Smiley face EQ, that's what we'll call it. And then the last thing, because I'm gonna get rid of most of this or this stuff, is my Studer A800. It just takes down the top end, boosts the bottom end, and yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm using my Fat Boy preset essentially, which I made up, and I made a video dedicated to that. So we're not using this anymore, so we don't need to talk about it. And also I just need to preference that, like I said, the mix bus stuff does not come on automatically. It just comes on when I'm like, mix feels good. Let's start throwing some stuff together. The only time I am actually mixing through anything would be this Manly Very Mew. And that's like 70% through the mix. Sometimes I'll throw it on right at the beginning, but it just depends on the song. And then this last thing is the standard clip. Just a clipper. There's really not much to talk about because I changes all the time. So if you are wanting to use a clipper, I highly should like suggest this one. It works really good. And then my limiter is just the ozone. So nothing special there, nothing going on. And then for metering, I'm using Insight 2. I actually need to switch this with the Metra by PSP, which I have a video coming out on this. Just so I can see how loud my mix is, my LUFS, whatever the case is. I think I have a preset. Let me throw that in real quick. Wait, let me see. Oh, there it is. I was like, boom. Starting point. That's what I called it. So there's that. And all right. Now let's talk about, I just hit play. Let's talk about vocal and then we'll get out of here. So I have a doubler, Dimension D. Talked about this in my last video. You can see that I should have done this. There's probably so much static throughout the video. So this is supposed to be like this. Now the static should go away. I mentioned this before. For some reason, Plugin Alliance needs to fix this. Every time or every now and then I'll open up a session and my V or THD and V gain, they'll reset. And I'll be like, why is my session so noisy? So yeah, fix that right now. But you can see that I have this channel strip all the way across my effects just because essentially that's how they would have been on a console. So I just want to make sure that they're running through the same thing, try to get as much quote unquote analog vibe as possible. And then it also allows me to have a compressor and EQ on there if the built-in EQ and if there is a compressor into the effects is not working. Then yeah. So dim D, doubler, I'm using micro shift. Nothing special there. Dim D, I'm using the Studio D, UAD, another Moog on there, and the EQ just to kind of make it sound different. I go in depth in a video about it like 2 videos ago, so go check that out. And reverbs, got a 480L, 22 4L, EMT 140, Bricasti, and the AMS. It's not the actual AMS. I wish it was. I don't have a UAD card, so I can't use my AMS anymore. So I just use this preset that I made, which I think I might be changing out for this 2445, right? I think I might be switching it out for this. And I'm going to do it right now. Because I don't know, this thing just sounds good. If you're not too familiar with it, it's another EMT. So like if you're used to the 140 plate, which I'm using the Arteria version, by the way. Go through this real quick. 480 using Relab, Lexicon, 224 UAD, 140 using Arteria, Bricasti, Seventh Heaven Classic, and then now 2445 we are using PSP Audio. So if you want 10% off and you want this plugin or any plugin, use my code in the description below, Tolbert10, get you 10% off. So yeah, and that's what I'm using for reverbs, delays. Got a mono, slap, quarter, half, or full. No, half. Galaxy on the mono, Valhalla for the slap, quarter, 2500, half, 2500. Just going through them because, like I said, I literally just made a video about all this, so you can go check that out. But those are the plugins I'm using. This is my template. That's pretty much it. Oh, drum crush, bass crush. Everybody has their own parallel. This is just Andrew Shep's setup, pretty much. At least at one point he was using this. Probably not anymore. I don't really use parallel compression that much. It's there though. Bass, crush, or parallel compression. I stole this from Alex Toomey. Saturator. Just gave you a code, so go buy that if you want it. Microshift and Kirchhoff. And that's pretty much it. That's my template. Hopefully everybody enjoyed that. Yeah. I'll see you on the next one. Peace.